Chernobyl, Fukushima, Lake Karachay, names that make your blood run cold. Places where a single breath can kill you in minutes. Where radiation levels are so high, your phone would fry before you could take a selfie. But here's what nobody tells you. Life never left. Right now, as we speak, wolves are howling through Pripyat's abandoned streets, wild horses gallop past trusted playgrounds. And deep inside Chernobyl's reactor core, something incredible is growing. Something that shouldn't exist. These are Earth's most radioactive death zones. Places science declared uninhabitable for centuries. Yet somehow, impossibly, they're more alive than ever. You think you know what radiation does. Think again. By the end of this video, you'll discover creatures that literally eat nuclear energy for breakfast. You'll meet people who chose radiation over exile. April 26, 1986, 1:23 a.m. reactor for at Chernobyl nuclear power plant is running a safety test. Everything that could go wrong does. The reactor explodes with the force of 400 Hiroshima bombs. A radioactive fire burns for 10 days straight, spewing poison across Europe. The explosion launches the reactor's 1,000-ton concrete lid into the air like a bottle cap. Graphite chunks rain down like black snow. The radiation is so intense that helicopter pilots flying overhead develop radiation sickness within hours. Their hair falls out, their skin burns from the inside. Within hours, a 30-kilometer exclusion zone is declared around the plant. It's supposed to be temporary. 40 years later, it's still there. Pripyat, once a thriving city of 50,000 people, becomes the world's most famous ghost town overnight. The Soviet authorities tell residents they'll be back in 3 days. They pack light suitcases, leave everything behind, and board evacuation buses. They never return. Their belongings still sit exactly where they left them: toys on bedroom floors, meals half-eaten on kitchen tables, calendars frozen on April 26th. The experts calculate that nothing will live here for 20,000 years. The soil is poisoned, the air is toxic, the water is death. Nature, they declare, is finished in this place. They were spectacularly wrong. Within months of the evacuation, something extraordinary begins to happen. Without humans around to hunt, trap, or disturb them, wildlife starts moving in. Not the sickly, mutated creatures you'd expect from horror movies. Healthy, thriving animals in numbers nobody anticipated. The first to arrive were the scavengers, rats, mice, and insects. Then came their predators, foxes, badgers, and wildcats. Within a year, larger mammals started appearing. Deer emerged from distant forests. Wild boar, virtually extinct in the region, returned in droves. But the real shock came in the late 1990s when motion sensor cameras captured something nobody expected. Wolves, not just a few straggly survivors, but entire packs, dozens of them, then hundreds. Today, nearly 4 decades after the disaster, the Chernobyl exclusion zone hosts the largest wolf population in Europe. Over 300 wolves roam an area smaller than Rhode Island. They've organized into super packs of up to 30 individuals, 3 times larger than normal wolf groups. These aren't ordinary wolves anymore. They've developed behavioral adaptations nobody predicted. They're less afraid of humans than their non-irradiated cousins. They hunt during daylight hours when wolves typically sleep. They've learned to break into abandoned buildings, using them as dens for their pups. But wolves are just the beginning. The Przewalski's horses, considered extinct in the wild since the 1960s, were reintroduced to the zone in 1998. Experts worried they wouldn't survive the radiation. Instead, they've thrived beyond all expectations. Their population has tripled. They've spread throughout the exclusion zone, reclaiming territories their ancestors roamed centuries ago. European bison, absent from this region for 800 years, were reintroduced in 2019. Within 3 years, calves were being born in radioactive meadows. These massive creatures, weighing up to 2,000 pounds, graze peacefully where Soviet engineers once worked. Brown bears have returned to Ukraine for the first time in over a century. Lynx stalk through overgrown streets. Elk, deer, wild boar, and countless smaller mammals have turned the exclusion zone into Europe's most unexpected wildlife sanctuary. Bird populations tell an even more remarkable story. Over 200 species now nest in the zone, including many rare and endangered ones. White-tailed eagles, nearly extinct in Europe, soar over Pripyat's abandoned apartment blocks. Cranes, storks, and swans breed in radioactive wetlands. The most incredible residents, however, aren't the animals, they're the people who refuse to leave. Meet the babushkas, the grandmothers of Chernobyl. Despite government orders, despite radiation warnings, despite threats of arrest, about 130 elderly women returned to their contaminated villages within months of the evacuation. They've been living there ever since. Anna Zavarotnya, now 85, returned to her village of Kupovate in 1987. She grows potatoes, tomatoes, and cucumbers in soil that's still radioactive. She drinks milk from cows that graze on contaminated grass. She's outlived 3 husbands and most of her neighbors who evacuated to supposedly safer cities. The radiation doesn't scare me, she says, feeding chickens in her radioactive yard. Loneliness does. These women represent something profound about human resilience. They've chosen familiar radiation over unfamiliar exile. They've decided that dying in their homeland is better than living safely elsewhere, and remarkably, many of them are healthier than their evacuated peers. March 11, 2011, 2:46 p.m. The earth beneath Japan shakes with the force of 1,500 atomic bombs. The magnitude 9.0 earthquake triggers a tsunami that reaches heights of 40 meters taller than a 12-story building. Waves travel at 435 miles per hour, faster than a jet plane, carrying away everything in their path. At Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, the earthquake knocks out main power. The tsunami destroys backup generators. Without electricity to run cooling systems, 3 reactors begin to melt down. Hydrogen explosions blow apart containment buildings. Radioactive water pours into the Pacific Ocean. Within days, a 20-kilometer exclusion zone is declared. Over 160,000 people evacuate their homes. Towns like Okumer, Futaba, and Nami become instant ghost cities. Unlike Chernobyl's rural setting, Fukushima's exclusion zone encompasses modern suburbs, shopping centers, and industrial areas. The first creatures to claim these abandoned spaces weren't exotic wildlife, they were farm animals. Thousands of cattle, pigs, and chickens were left behind during the hasty evacuation. Without humans to feed or contain them, they broke free and went feral. Within months, domestic pigs had reverted to their wild instincts, growing thick hair and sharp tusks. Cattle roamed suburban streets like urban bison. Chickens nested in abandoned cars and convenience stores. But the real invaders came from the mountains, wild boar, normally afraid of human settlements, discovered that abandoned towns offered unlimited food and zero danger. They descended in unprecedented numbers, turning Fukushima's ghost towns into their personal territories. These aren't small animals. Japanese wild boar can weigh up to 400 pounds and run 30 miles per hour. They're incredibly intelligent with problem-solving abilities that rival primates. In Fukushima, they've learned to open doors by turning handles. They've figured out how to operate automatic sliding doors at supermarkets. They raid vending machines, somehow understanding which buttons to push. One pack learned to break into a pachinko parlor, where they slept on the gaming machines during the day and foraged at night. Another group took over a school, using classrooms as communal dens. They've been observed using tools, rocks to break open containers, sticks to retrieve food from high places. The boar have also learned to travel in organized formations. Groups of 20-30 animals move through towns in military-style columns, with scouts leading the way and sentries watching for threats they communicate through a complex system of grunts, squeals, and body language. But perhaps most remarkably, they've developed radiation awareness. Scientists tracking the boar discovered they avoid the most contaminated areas instinctively. They seem to sense radiation levels and adjust their behavior accordingly, spending less time in hotspots and more time in cleaner zones. Japanese macaque snow monkeys have also colonized the exclusion zone. These primates, already known for their intelligence, have exhibited extraordinary adaptations to radioactive life. They've learned to wash fruit and vegetables in streams before eating them, somehow understanding that this reduces contamination. The monkeys have also changed their social behavior. Normally territorial, Fukushima's monkey troops share resources and territories peacefully. They've developed new grooming behaviors, spending more time cleaning each other's fur, possibly to remove radioactive particles. Even more surprising are the farmers who chose to stay. Despite evacuation orders, dozens of elderly farmers refuse to abandon their land. They continue growing rice, vegetables, and raising livestock in the exclusion zone. Naoto Matsumura, known as the guardian of Fukushima's animals, returned to the zone within weeks of the evacuation. He's been caring for abandoned pets and livestock ever since. His radiation exposure exceeds limits set for nuclear workers by factors of 10, yet at 63, he shows no signs of radiation sickness. Matsumura feeds over 50 cats, dozens of dogs, cattle, pigs, and even ostriches left behind by evacuees. He grows his own food in contaminated soil and drinks water from local wells. When asked about the risk, he shrugs. "We're all going to die eventually. At least this way, I die doing something meaningful." Naoto Kan, another stubborn farmer, never stopped growing rice in the exclusion zone. His crops test positive for cesium-137 at levels that would horrify health officials. He eats them anyway, along with vegetables from his radioactive garden. At 73, he's healthier than most people half his age. While Chernobyl and Fukushima grab headlines, they're not even close to being Earth's most radioactive places. That distinction belongs to locations so contaminated, so incredibly toxic, that they make those famous disasters look almost quaint by comparison. Lake Karachay in Russia's Ural Mountains holds the terrifying title of the most radioactive place on planet Earth. Standing on its shore for just 5 minutes delivers a fatal dose of radiation, 600 roentgens, enough to kill you within hours. An hour of exposure would kill you in minutes. It's a death sentence in liquid form. This wasn't always a radioactive hellscape. Until the 1950s, Lake Karachay was a pristine mountain lake. Crystal clear and teeming with fish. Local Tatar and Bashkir people considered it sacred. They held festivals on its shores, children swam in its waters, and families picnicked under birch trees along its banks. Then the Soviet Union's nuclear program arrived. The nearby Mayak Production Association, one of the USSR's most secret facilities, began producing plutonium for nuclear weapons. They needed somewhere to dump their radioactive waste. Lake Karachay was convenient, isolated, and according to Soviet logic, expendable for over 40 years. From 1951 to 1994, Mayak dumped radioactive waste directly into the lake. Not just small amounts, millions of gallons of liquid nuclear horror. The contamination levels are beyond comprehension. The lake contains 4.4 exabecquerels of radioactivity, more than twice the amount released by Chernobyl. During a drought in 1967, the lake began to dry up. Radioactive dust, carried by winds, contaminated an area of 1,800 square kilometers. 500,000 people were exposed to radiation, though the Soviet government didn't tell them for decades. This incident, known as the Kishtim disaster, was kept secret for 30 years. The Soviet solution to the shrinking radioactive lake was typically Soviet. They filled it with hollow concrete blocks and declared the problem solved. Today, Lake Karachay is essentially a radioactive concrete parking lot. The radiation is still there, still deadly, contained by nothing more than hope and Soviet engineering. Yet, incredibly, microscopic life persists in and around this nuclear nightmare. Radiation-resistant bacteria and archaea have been found in sediment samples. They've adapted to live in conditions that would sterilize medical equipment. Some species have developed unique metabolic pathways that actually use radioactive decay as an energy source. Mayak itself represents one of humanity's greatest nuclear disasters that nobody talks about. This secret city, known only as Chelyabinsk 40, didn't appear on any public maps for decades. It was so classified that even its workers' families didn't know what they did for a living. On September 29, 1957, a storage tank containing 70-80 tons of high-level radioactive waste exploded with the force of 70-85 tons of TNT. The explosion contaminated over 20,000 square kilometers with radioactive debris. It was the third worst nuclear disaster in history, but the Soviet Union covered it up completely. The explosion scattered radioactive materials across an area larger than San Francisco. Entire villages were evacuated in secret and erased from maps. Residents were told they were being relocated for agricultural development. Their contaminated homes were bulldozed and buried. But here's the incredible part: many people never left. Villagers in the contaminated zone continued farming radioactive soil, drinking contaminated water, and breathing radioactive dust. They weren't told about the radiation for decades. They just lived with it, adapted to it, and somehow survived, Semipalatinsk Kazakhstan witnessed. Even more extreme nuclear testing. Between 1949 and 1989, the Soviet Union detonated 456 nuclear bombs at this site, more than all other nuclear testing sites combined. The explosions ranged from small tactical weapons to massive hydrogen bombs hundreds of times more powerful than Hiroshima. For 40 years, the ground shook regularly as the USSR perfected its nuclear arsenal. Entire generations of Kazakhs were born, lived, and died within nuclear fallout. Children played in radioactive craters. Left by bomb tests, families unknowingly built homes from concrete mixed with radioactive debris. The most powerful bomb tested at Semipalatinsk was a 50 megaton hydrogen bomb, the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated. The mushroom cloud rose 40 miles into the atmosphere. The shockwave circled the Earth 3 times. Windows broke 560 miles away in Finland. Local residents remember these tests vividly. The sky would light up brighter than the sun. The Earth would shake like an earthquake. Radioactive ash would fall like snow, covering everything in a gray dust that glowed faintly in the dark. Soviet authorities assured locals the tests were safe, even beneficial. They claimed radiation would improve crop yields and cure diseases. Some tests were conducted deliberately close to populated areas to study radiation effects on humans. Entire villages became unwitting test subjects in history's largest human radiation experiment. Today, people still live in all these contaminated areas. Not scientists in hazmat suits conducting research, ordinary families raising children, growing food, and living normal lives in some of the most radioactive places on Earth. In the deepest, most radioactive sections of Chernobyl's reactor building, where radiation levels would kill a human in minutes, something extraordinary is happening. Black fungi are growing on the walls, floors, and even inside the reactor core itself. They're not just surviving, they're thriving in radiation levels that would sterilize a surgical suite. These organisms have achieved something that sounds like science fiction. They eat radiation. Through a process called radiosynthesis, they convert gamma radiation into chemical energy, essentially photosynthesizing with nuclear energy instead of sunlight. The key to their superpower is melanin, the same pigment that gives human skin its color. But while our melanin provides limited protection from UV rays, these fungi have weaponized theirs. Their melanin acts like a biological solar panel, capturing high-energy radiation and converting it into usable chemical energy. Scientists first discovered this phenomenon in 1991, 5 years after the Chernobyl disaster. Researchers exploring the reactor building noticed thick black growths covering contaminated surfaces. Initially dismissed as ordinary mold, closer examination revealed they were unlike anything previously known to science. These radiotrophic fungi belong to several species, including Cladosporium sphaerospermum, Cryptococcus neoformans, and Wangiella dermatitidis. They grow 3 times faster in high radiation environments than in normal conditions. Remove the radiation, and their growth slows dramatically. NASA has become intensely interested in these organisms. Space is filled with deadly cosmic radiation that poses the greatest threat to long-term space travel. If astronauts could harness radiation-eating fungi, they could potentially survive years-long journeys to Mars and beyond. But fungi aren't the only radiation superheroes. Meet Deinococcus radiodurans, nicknamed Conan the bacterium. For its incredible toughness, this microscopic organism can survive radiation doses 3,000 times stronger than what would instantly kill a human. When radiation shreds its DNA into hundreds of pieces, Deinococcus radiodurans performs an almost miraculous feat of self-repair. Within hours, it perfectly reconstructs its genetic code from the fragments, like solving a jigsaw puzzle with millions of pieces. Scientists have blasted it with radiation levels equivalent to being inside a nuclear bomb explosion. It shrugs it off and multiplies. The bacterium achieves this through multiple redundant copies of its genome and incredibly efficient DNA repair mechanisms. While humans have 2 copies of each chromosome, Deinococcus radiodurans maintains for 210 copies. When radiation damages some copies, it uses the undamaged ones as templates for repair. Even more remarkably, this bacterium can survive in the vacuum of space, extreme cold, acid, and dehydration. It's so tough that scientists believe It could survive a journey between planets on meteorites, potentially seeding life throughout the universe. The animals living in radioactive zones are also evolving in real time, developing adaptations that seemed impossible just decades ago. Barn swallows in Chernobyl show dramatically increased mutation rates, but instead of dying from genetic damage, they've developed supercharged antioxidant systems. These birds produce antioxidants at levels far exceeding normal birds. Their cellular repair mechanisms work over time, fixing damage faster than radiation can cause it. Some populations show genetic changes that appear to provide natural cancer resistance. Chernobyl's tree frogs have undergone one of the most visible adaptations. Eastern tree frogs are normally bright green, but many Chernobyl populations have turned completely black. Scientists believe this color change helps them harness radiation like the fungi do, converting harmful energy into something useful. The change isn't superficial, it's genetic. Black frogs produce offspring that are also black, even when moved to non-radioactive environments. They've permanently altered their genome in response to radiation exposure. Wolves in the exclusion zone show genetic mutations that might make them more resistant to cancer. Their immune systems appear enhanced, and they show lower rates of genetic abnormalities than expected given their radiation exposure. Some populations of rodents have developed enlarged organs, particularly spleens and livers, that help process radioactive particles more efficiently. Others show enhanced DNA repair capabilities similar to Deinonychus radiodurans, though not nearly as extreme. But perhaps the most intriguing adaptations are happening in humans. People living in high background radiation areas around the world, places like Ramsar, Iran, where natural radiation levels are 50 times higher than normal, show remarkable health statistics. Instead of the increased cancer rates you'd expect, these populations often have lower cancer incidence than people living in low radiation areas. Their cells seem to activate protective mechanisms that not only defend against radiation but also provide broader health benefits. Some researchers believe low-level radiation exposure triggers hormesis, a biological response where mild stress makes organisms stronger. Like how exercise stresses muscles to make them stronger, or how vaccines stress immune systems to make them more effective, radiation might stress cellular repair systems into becoming more efficient. Studies of atomic bomb survivors in Japan found that those exposed to low doses of radiation actually lived longer than unexposed populations. Nuclear workers, despite occupational radiation exposure, show lower cancer rates than the general public. Could humans be adapting to radiation in real time? Some scientists think we already are. Our modern world exposes us to more radiation than our ancestors from medical procedures, air travel, nuclear testing, fallout, and electronic devices. Our bodies might be responding by becoming more radiation resistant. Here is a reality check that will change how you think about radiation forever. You are radioactive right now. Your body contains about 140 grams of potassium, and roughly 0.012% of that is potassium-40, a radioactive isotope. This means your body emits about 4,000 radioactive decay events every single second of your life. You're literally a walking nuclear reactor that's been operating since the day you were born. Every breath you take, every bite you eat, every sip you drink adds more radioactive material to your body, and you're perfectly fine. That innocent banana you had for breakfast contains potassium-40 and radium-226, making it radioactive. Enough that a truckload of bananas would trigger radiation alarms at border crossings. The banana equivalent dose has become a standard unit for measuring radiation exposure because bananas are so consistently radioactive. Your granite countertops emit radon gas, a radioactive element that's the second leading cause of lung cancer. The smoke detector on your ceiling contains americium-2 for 1, a man-made radioactive isotope that's actually more dangerous than plutonium. Yet we live comfortably with these sources of radiation because they're familiar. Brazil nuts are so naturally radioactive, they'd be classified as radioactive waste if they were artificially contaminated to the same levels. A single Brazil nut contains radium-226 and radium-228 at concentrations up to 1,000 times higher than typical foods. Yet they're sold in every grocery store without warning labels. Cigarettes deliver a double dose of radiation. Tobacco plants absorb radium from soil and concentrate it in their leaves. Polonium-210, the same isotope used to assassinate Russian spy Alexander Litvinenko, accumulates in tobacco smoke and deposits in smokers' lungs. A pack-a-day smoker receives as much radiation exposure as getting 300 chest X-rays per year. Flying exposes you to cosmic radiation that increases with altitude. A round-trip flight from New York to Los Angeles delivers the same radiation dose as a chest X-ray. Flight crews receive more occupational radiation exposure than nuclear power plant workers. Yet we don't fear flying or demand radiation badges for frequent flyers. Medical procedures are the largest source of man-made radiation exposure for most people. A single CT scan of your chest delivers 100 times more radiation than a chest X-ray. A full-body CT scan exposes you to more radiation than Chernobyl cleanup workers received in their first month on the job. Yet millions of these procedures are performed safely every year. The difference between feared and accepted radiation is entirely psychological. We fear the invisible, the unknown, the dramatic. We fear radiation from nuclear accidents but ignore radiation from medical procedures. We fear radiation from power plants but accept radiation from smoke detectors. This fear has real consequences. After Chernobyl, thousands of pregnant women across Europe had unnecessary abortions, terrified that radiation would harm their babies. The actual radiation doses most received were lower than a medical X-ray. The fear caused more harm than the radiation itself. The same pattern repeated after Fukushima. Japan banned food from contaminated areas, even though the radiation levels were often lower than naturally occurring radiation in other foods. People relocated from low radiation areas to higher radiation areas to escape contamination. But here is where it gets really interesting. Some scientists believe low-level radiation exposure might actually be beneficial. It's called radiation hormesis, and it's based on the observation that mild stresses often make biological systems stronger. Exercise stresses your muscles and makes them stronger. Vaccines stress your immune system and make it more effective. Heat stress in saunas provides health benefits. Cold stress from winter swimming boosts metabolism and immunity. Could radiation stress provide similar benefits? The evidence is compelling. People living in areas with high natural background radiation, places like Kerala, India, or Yangjiang, China, where radiation levels are 10 to 50 times higher than normal, don't show increased cancer rates. Often, they show decreased rates. Ramsar, Iran, has the highest natural background radiation in the world. Residents receive 260 times more radiation than the international average. Yet they have lower cancer rates than neighboring low radiation areas. Their immune systems appear enhanced, and they show greater resistance to radiation-induced genetic damage. Studies of nuclear workers consistently show lower cancer rates than the general population, despite occupational radiation exposure. This healthy worker effect was initially attributed to better healthcare and lifestyle, but even accounting for these factors, the protection remains. Atomic bomb survivors present the most extensive data on radiation effects. While high-dose exposures clearly increased cancer risk, survivors who received low doses actually lived longer than unexposed populations. They showed reduced rates of heart disease, stroke, and other age-related conditions. These findings have led some researchers to propose that our radiation safety standards are not just overly cautious, they might be counterproductive. By avoiding all radiation exposure, we might be missing out on beneficial hormetic effects. The hormesis hypothesis suggests that evolution equipped us with radiation repair mechanisms because we have always lived in a radioactive world. Cosmic rays, terrestrial radiation, and radioactive elements in our bodies mean we're constantly exposed to low levels of radiation. Our cellular repair systems evolved to handle this background. When we avoid all radiation exposure, these repair systems might become less active, like muscles that weaken without exercise. Low-level radiation exposure could keep these systems active and efficient, providing protection against not just radiation damage but other forms of cellular damage as well. If life can thrive in Earth's most radioactive death zones, what does that tell us about life's potential elsewhere in the universe? The organisms we've discovered challenge every assumption about the limits of life. The fungi growing inside Chernobyl's reactor core represent a form of life that literally eats the energy that kills us. They've achieved something that sounds like magic, converting nuclear radiation into food. If such organisms can evolve on Earth in just a few decades, What might exist on planets bathed in cosmic radiation for billions of years? Mars, with its thin atmosphere and lack of magnetic field, is bombarded by radiation that would kill most Earth life. But fungi that thrive on radiation could not only survive on Mars, they might flourish there. NASA is seriously investigating whether radiotrophic organisms could be used to protect astronauts or even terraform other planets. The animals adapting to radioactive environments show us evolution in fast forward. Wolves with enhanced cancer resistance, frogs that changed color to harness radiation, birds with supercharged antioxidant systems. These adaptations developed in just a few generations, not millions of years. This rapid adaptation suggests life is far more flexible and resilient than we imagined. If Earth life can adapt this quickly to nuclear radiation, something that didn't exist for most of evolutionary history, it can probably adapt to almost anything. The human populations living in radioactive areas provide the most profound lesson of all. The babushkas of Chernobyl, the farmers of Fukushima, the villagers near nuclear test sites, they've chosen meaning over safety, community over caution, home over health, and remarkably, many of them are thriving, not just surviving, but living longer, healthier lives than people who fled to safer places. They've discovered something profound about human resilience, that our greatest threats might not be the invisible dangers we fear, but the visible isolation we create trying to avoid them. Perhaps the real death zones aren't the radioactive places where life persists against all odds. Perhaps they're the sterile, safe places where we've eliminated every risk along with every meaning. You have just witnessed life's greatest magic trick, not just surviving where science says nothing should live, but thriving there. From wolves howling in Pripyat's radioactive ruins to fungi dining on nuclear energy inside Chernobyl's core, life doesn't just endure the impossible. It conquers it, adapts to it, and sometimes even benefits from it. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. Nature's extremophiles get more mind-bending from here. Next time, we're diving into creatures that make radiation eaters look ordinary. Think you've seen tough? Wait until you meet the organisms that party in sulfuric acid stronger than car battery fluid, the bacteria living inside volcanic vents at temperatures that melt lead, the life forms that have been frozen in Antarctic ice for millions of years without food, water, or oxygen and wake up hungry when thawed. We're talking about creatures that survive in the vacuum of space, organisms that thrive in salt concentrations that would pickle you instantly, and microbes that eat rocks and breathe methane. If radiation-resistant life exists in Earth's nuclear disasters, what monsters of resilience lurk in truly alien environments? What could be living in the acid clouds of Venus, the methane lakes of Titan, or the radiation-soaked ice of Europa? Drop a like if radiation will never scare you the same way again. Comment with your wildest theory about what extremophile we'll discover next. And subscribe to Factopia, because the universe's most impossible creatures are just getting started. In a cosmos full of hostile environments, life finds a way, and we're going deeper into the impossible next time.